So welcome to Krishi.System. Krishi.System is an endeavor to discover systems thinking in food and agriculture systems in an age of runaway climate change. Today we are doing a second edition of AI in Ag podcast. The first edition we did with Pratik Desai and Sachi Desai. In the second edition of AI in Ag podcast, we are joined with very special guests, Preethy Iyer, Rhishi Pete, and Sharif Babu. These two gentlemen, this wonderful lady, have come from very different worlds, and that's really the whole idea here, in terms of try and explore in what all ways where we could see AI in agriculture being implemented in diverse contexts, both across small holding and large holding. So maybe I don't want to do a formal introduction of sorts. You guys, everyone can easily look people up. But what I want to start off is maybe a very simple question of if you were to really look yourself into the mirror, what would be the most honest answer of the question, who am I? Anyone wants to start?
Problem solver.
Okay.
Disruptor.
I think I would say synthesizer. I like to synthesize things and look at them.
Beautiful. Thank you. Maybe I'll start with Rhishi here, because since Rhishi comes from slightly different context, especially in terms of the the geography, and also in terms of the kind of problems that you're grappling with. Rhishi, you play the role of both an analyst and also somebody who's working in the ecosystem. As you recently were telling me about that you've joined Gates Foundation as a senior advisor. From your vantage point, you and I did also this AI for Ag workshop we did with few folks there. From your vantage point, what is the most surprising thing in terms of how AI has been adopted in an agricultural context?
I think the surprising thing is maybe less about adoption. Maybe it is about adoption and the context, but the way things are moving very quickly. If you look at all the frontier labs and how quickly they're putting out the new capabilities, like every day, almost literally every day. And a lot of the ag industry is working with AI in different contexts. And AI is not new, like Gen AI is new, but AI is not new, right? I think that's one thing we need to keep in mind. So people have been playing with AI quite a bit. So it almost feels like there is a bit of a barbell distribution. There are people who are really want to adopt, try things, and then there's a large cohort of people who are still like not sure where to begin. They know they need to do something. They are afraid of being left behind, but they have a lot of questions on where do we begin? How much is it going to cost? What is going to be the ROI? Is this going to be just like every other tech story that we've heard in ag tech in the last 10 years? So that distribution has surprised me a little bit. You would expect more of a normal distribution. Maybe it is, maybe there's a variability bias, but I'm a little bit surprised by still there is a lot of hesitation around where do we begin, and we are 2026, and where do we spend money and what is the ROI? There are a lot of questions around it as well.
Interesting. The distribution also makes me want to go to Preethy now. Preethy, from your vantage point, you largely are working in deploying AI in a context where one would not instinctively go and first do that, right? Typically, I mean, and of course, that's because of the vantage point you are in, where you are working on. So, when you are deploying, we've talked about what you've been experimenting in terms of I was very fascinated when Vishala told me that you are trying to build the in a certain sense, an AI engine that maximizes income possibilities for women farmers. But from your vantage point, what is the surprising element that you are deploying, especially when it comes to areas where you are, I saw your piece on, the year of woman farmer has not gone into the AI kind of context there, right? So what has been your surprising discovery when you started bring these two different worlds together,
Mhm.
from the area that you are natively and coming with, and to
Yes.
the area that you are right now working on.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I came from an area of typical tech, right? Where we are doing cutting edge tech, where we are building products again for enterprises. For my user was a completely different persona, like nothing to do with the kind of people I work with every day. So I think my greatest surprise, there were two greatest takeaways for me, right? One is, and so obviously I was biased with what the actual farmers were because I never had that access to it. So basically what I had learned. One is that they know a lot, right? So when I go there as this typical tech person saying, "Hey, I'm going to solve your problem," the first surprising thing was that and I was actually trying to build a system that was all about sensors and collecting data so better recommendations could be made on what to grow on their land. They were like, "We don't need it. We touch the soil, we know." You know, and they knew exactly how to do things, how to problem solve on their land. um, so there was a lot of knowledge already in those women because they've had years of working in that same, in that same context, in that same ecosystem with the elephants and the monkeys and the boars and everything. So that was the first sort of surprise or that sort of breakthrough for me that, okay, what all of us talk about, like even if before I got into the farm and I did my research online, right, speaking about AI and ag tech and whatever, it was all about drones and precision agriculture. And, these were the things that were very popular. They also were for a different context, um, you know, large farms, agricultural lands, etc. So here the main thing was that there was enough and more knowledge with the women that I was working with. And the second was they didn't care much about technology, but they knew where they wanted help. So they were very open with saying that, okay, see, I can do all this, but how do I know that what I'm growing is what people want, even though we have a subscriber model? So discussing with them is where we were able to figure out where exactly can tech actually be an intervention. So that was the first thing. The second thing is when I started working with more collectives. And there I realized that there was this disparity because there were these bunch of older women farmers who had this ton of knowledge. And just like a couple of kilometers down from them, there were a bunch of women, young women who wanted to be farmers who were clueless, right? So how do you bridge that gap where there are people who want to farm, who want to make it their living? And then you have women who have this years of knowledge, who know what to do, but then they didn't care. But when they realize that, the cities where they're going to get their income from, how do you understand what the city wants? So these were like the two, it opened my eyes into from that perspective that there were some people who were they're very specific about what their problems were and how we could help them. One set of women. There's other set of women, very tech savvy. They all have smartphones but have no clue how to farm. So how do you build a system that can work for this diverse set of women, all small landholders? Not so you can't really think of like one, like take a drone and put it everywhere, or put a precision agriculture system and let everyone use. So those were the two surprising. There was no one size fits all, which works very well with software. But you couldn't really do that here. Yeah.
Nice. Interesting. Sharif, as someone who's the youngest and also the wisest in this group here, I'm also
Thank
very
you for the
curious to.
compliment, Venki. Yeah.
No, I'm very curious in terms of you've seen, multiple tech waves. Are there any aspects about this tech wave that we are seeing that you're seeing is very different and very has evolved differently or surprisingly ways from the previous tech waves we all have sort of seen in the past? And what have been your surprising discoveries in the current AI-led technological wave that you see?
Yeah. The artificial intelligence or the so-called LLM models, which were taught as AI, has emerged from the West, which doesn't understand the language of India. No, it should have been the other way around. India has been the spearhead of all the jugaads. You buy a 2 crore machinery, the operator will put a small attachment and then make it work productivity better. in a 2 crore machinery. That is not.
Oftentimes, it's also a way to work around also the broken system. Yeah.
Who should have given a model to the West. But we are trying to adapt a model from the West to India, which doesn't fit at all. Okay, so that is one thing. Second thing is adoption of artificial intelligence in agriculture. If you look at it, there are 3 things. One, the farming, and in the farming, you use agricultural implements and the protection equipments. Now, in the farming, we are coming up with several models. There are even a model from China, latest one, which has a lot of agriculture knowledge and all. This knowledge base is totally on the research papers, as well as the findings of the universities, as well as the published sources, not from the actual ground, negligible content of actual ground. So we have to start from scratch, like how we collect data from the hyper-local perspective. The farmer cannot work on something developed for a region. It has to be something hyper-local to his land, which is characteristically different from what is developed. So how we collect data, one. Second, where is AI applied to the agriculture implements? See, someone comes up with a 25 crore project on developing a autonomous tractor, which will work on this with a battery and all. Now that is bound to be a failure. You know why? 2 crore tractors are in India, which has power steering already for the past 15, 20 years. Why are we not coming up with a simple gadget that can be fitted to the power tractor and made it autonomous? Why are we thinking totally different solutions, spending crores and crores of rupees just excited by the idea? So we need to think in the shoes of the farmer before we come up with anything, even if it is going to be artificial intelligence, which needs highest engineering skill as well as intelligent analysis in a air-conditioned lab and air-conditioned office. There has to be a paradigm shift in how we start formulating policies as well as solutions for the last mile. Ultimately, it has to go to the last mile farmers, right? There are 500 million farmers in the world, among whom about 400 million are still last mile farmers. Only 100 million are tech savvy who use smartphones. So where are the solutions for that? Is anyone thinking about it? That's my question.
Sure, maybe I think
question,
in some ways, yeah, no problem. So in many ways, I think, Rhishi, what you're working on in a public problem context, right, especially with the Gates Foundation work, I think in a way is attempting to answer that question, right, like what Sharif is talking about. Given that you have also worked largely in the private ecosystem with Google and with also other players in the agri-tech ecosystem in the North American regions and other contexts, what is like the sort of perceptual shift that you had to do when you were looking at it from a public data perspective, from a public problem perspective, especially for the kind of problems which Gates Foundation deals with, right? Like, did you have to do some kind of a perceptual shift in looking at the way the problems, what kind of problems are being solved there, and how did you sort of look at that question very closely?
Yeah, it is definitely like if you take the example of AI advisory, that's what Gates Foundation does. Now, the problem that you solve with AI advisory is very different in, let's say, North American context versus, let's say, India or Africa context, right? So, for example, here in the US, Bear and a lot of companies have put out these sort of agents, chatbot is not the right word, but these are sort of LLM-based agents. And they are being used not directly by the farmer, they're being used by a salesperson and agronomist to make their work more efficient. So, for example, a farmer wants to apply a particular fungicide or some chemical. Now there are a lot of rules and regulations and sort of rules of thumbs as to how do you apply this. Can you apply this in this context? Wind has to be below a certain speed, and it has to be away from a water body, and the crop has to be in this stage. And trying to keep track of all of that information for a human being is challenging. So instead, what you do is you feed all that information to your LLM and build a model, and then the advisor or the agronomist uses that model and then uses that to make their job more efficient, right? And so in that way, they can provide more timely advice. So here, the problem is not lack of advice. The challenge is how can we provide timely advice which is more or less accurate, right? So that's the problem you're trying to solve. And also, how do you so that they can position the products that we are trying to farmer, they can position that product appropriately, right? So because you have like hundreds of different seed varieties, how do I position the one that is going to work for the farmer so that I look like a hero, the farmer looks like a hero, will come back to me next year to buy more seed or more chemical from it. So that's sort of the problem. I think when you go to India or Africa, a lot of times the advisory is not even there, right? So it's you're going from zero to something. And so, for example, depending on which data you look at, the ratio of farmers to extension agents is like 6,000 to 1 or 10,000 to 1. And which is basically practically, as a farmer, you are on your own or you're based on what your community, your friends know. There is no sort of expert to come in and help you. Extension model is a very successful model throughout the world. And even in India, where it works well. So there, the challenge is how do we get these type of extension type services to people or farmers who don't have access to that, right, at all. And so in that case, you have to really reframe your thinking, because there you have to start with building trust with the system. You have to show to the farmer that I'm looking out for you. I'm looking for you in the best possible way, and I'm available more or less to you. And to Preeti, your point about women farmers, right? Like that is also, women are also finding these type of agents to be much easier to work with, because as a woman, it's much harder to go and ask a man a question. Whereas if you talk to an agent, like the agent is not going to judge you. And so there are other these sort of side benefits that you're seeing. So I think the big reframing is around sort of really understanding the context and understanding what problem you're trying to solve. The solution is the same, but the problem that you're solving is different. And the conditions are different, right? Like, for example, India has the benefit of some of the cheapest data available when you think about mobile, right? If you go to African countries, the data on a per megabyte or per gigabyte metric, it's much more expensive. India has really cheap data, whereas it's much more expensive in Africa. So now in that context, how do you deploy this solution, right? So you have to like think about all these constraints that are not here, and try to come up with solutions for sort of newer problems.
So maybe, since I want to double click on the women farmer part, taking from what Rishi is pointing out, right? Typically in an Indian context, there is almost at least from whatever my understanding from an agricultural household, there is a parallel economy, right, which a woman manages, and there is a man economy that a man manages. Right? Like even in credit, we see these behaviors, right? Like men take certain kinds of institutional sources of credit, whereas women take another source of credit. And there is always a question of like, that's where the invisibilization comes in, like because the men part of the system is more legible to the system, whereas what the women is doing in the kind of economies that they're working in, the microeconomies that they're working in, is oftentimes invisible there. And that's where the question comes as to, can they really be included within the system there? Right. So when you are, if you were to go a little more deeper in terms of when you're doing that, looking at it from a drawing board, right? Do you sort of keep the women within the larger agricultural household context, or do we treat them as separate autonomous agents and then look at their decision models? So that's what maybe I thought we could go a little more deeper there. Yeah.
Do you want Preeti to address that or?
Yeah, Preeti. I thought I'll
Yeah.
go with Preeti and then come to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So I think for me, from what I've worked with, I have had the privilege of working exclusively with the women farmers. The men, my story with the men ends with, so just to give a context, right? So our women have made collectives. They have a collective of their own. And this collective leases land from men because the men have not been using that farmland for whatever reason, right? So we lease land from these women and from these men, and the women grow vegetables for the city on these lands, and we do a regenerative model. So my story with men ends with them leasing the land to us, and the men in the villages. And from what I have observed, they primarily play the roles of, like you said, right? They're more operational. They're like, okay, this is where my journey ends. And when I see the other farms where men are there, they are the ones that decide what crops to grow, how to grow, what inputs to buy, etc. Right? So they do all these executive decisions. But the women, pretty much anywhere where I mean, when I work with the women, it's only the women. But in the other farms where men are the ones that are making these decisions, buying the seeds and everything, it's the women that are sowing. It's the women that are de-weeding. They are the sort of the labor that you call. So they are not considered as farmers. They're considered as labor, and these women actually also manage the house. So uh, everyone comes into work, even on hot days like this. They can come into work only by 10 in the morning because they have to take care of the entire morning, um, you know, cooking and cleaning and getting everybody ready, packing food for the husband who goes, herding goats and cows, all of it. And then they come to the farm and they do this drudgered work of weeding every day, or sowing, or taking care of the plants. They also do a bit of spraying. They have the backpack or the spray can, and they go spraying. However, if it is larger work like tilling or even that, obviously they need a man. Otherwise, the man is pretty much comes, sets up the process, and then goes. The rest of it is all women. That is something that I've observed throughout wherever I've been. So yes, women are very invisible, and especially in the Banerghatta region, women are the ones that are taking loans, very surprisingly. Men, there are a lot of financial products there, but women are the ones that always want to take loans, want to come and ask for various types of products that could be useful for them. Men are not the ones that are coming up front and taking loans. They do the whole EMI bit, the online EMI bit, in terms of going and buying a phone or buying a bike, and say my bike is on EMI, right? So that's the product that they've bought. But to pay the EMI, the woman takes a loan to pay the EMI. So that's a pattern that I've seen across. So women do the invisible work pretty much in all contexts, while the men do the more, visible, strategic kind of work. And of course, I don't know if Rishi, you've seen this across the world, but here the standard state of all the men that I have interacted with in the farms is they are drunk. So, so and which very surprisingly, the women have understood like it is a part of their life. Like for them, their men being drunk is the normalcy, right? So they work around the fact of their men making bad decisions as drunk people, and they try to work on how to continue to support them in that state, right? So that's the other thing that I've observed. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe and the next round when I come in, I want to tell a little bit more in terms of the data model and how do you therefore, like, when you sort of building the
Venki, you're
systems for.
breaking up.
Oh, is it? Okay. So I was just saying maybe at the next round, I would love to go a little deeper on, in what ways can, when we are designing a data model or when you're sort of designing an algorithm or an AI engine that sort of looks at maximizing the opportunities, how do you allow them to set their goals and all of that? So maybe I thought I'll go a little deeper on that
Sure.
side in the next round. But I want to come to Sharif. Sharif, you were talking about how indigenous models are important and what we need to do, right? In your work at at Agri CPS, can you look at help me understand in what ways you've built native models that kind of work in the Indian context there, right? And in what ways have they helped you address the challenges in an Indian context more better? You're on mute, sir.
Okay. For any model to be effectively address the queries, they have to be trained with the right data. So that is a fundamental principle in model building. So it has to also respond to not the westernized English kind of questions, but the local dialect, which is about 1,600 plus or something in India. So Sarvam has done wonderful work on, to some extent about 40-50%. But we need to start building a local Indian agriculture model by collecting all the agricultural dialects, like what they talk in the field, which may not be grammatically correct and all, but every area has got a different way of expressing, of doing the same thing or telling it in different way. So that word list or the vocabulary has to be built from scratch. Or maybe we can scratch the YouTube videos, but I don't know how far it will be effective. What second is that the data has to be collected from the field, as I said earlier. Now, that could be made possible only by automating the existing what you call the implements. Put a simple retrofit box kind of thing, which will have an eye, and then it will start collecting data as well as automate the work of a simple tiller or some other whatever implements there. You don't have to change the design. It will work the same way, but it will automate it. That's the simplest investment, will attract something. Instead of buying, if someone wants to buy automated tractor, it will be approximately 30 to 50 lakhs in Indian countries. Even if you import a Chinese tractor, it's 50 lakhs. If it is a US autonomous tractor, it is 1 crore. Now, if it is going to be in India, it has to be something like 5 to 6 lakhs rupee retrofit box that can automatically run the tractor and collect the data also. That is the kind of approach I think we need in collecting data. Now, the language, collecting data, and then we cannot start it with a already built open model. We need to start from scratch, from the transformer level, or the latest developments Google has on transformer model. So we have to start building from there. So for that, we need huge number of GPU farms, task people, force, and I think it will take about 150 to 200 crore to build such a model. But it will bring a paradigm shift in agriculture. I can assure you that.
No, maybe to go a little bit more into the operational side of it, maybe Rishi, you started, I recently saw you started the Sky Haven group with a bunch of your friends also from the AI advisory world, right? Like today, to connect back to the question which Sharif is bringing up is, at one level, yes, we know frontier labs are moving in, progress has happened, but at the interface layer, at the intermediary layer or the middleware layers, right, where we bring the application layer, right now, there is always a question of, do I only stick to the application layer or will it end up becoming another GPT wrapper, right? So how do you deal with that question when you are actually looking at some of these problems, specifically in agriculture context? Because we know that at least Claude is not yet coming to an application layer for agriculture, but Claude is largely into a certain sense come for the coding per se there, right? So to how long can we build the application middleware layer? Is largely a question, right? Or well, that can also be but taken over by a verticalized AI there. How do you deal with that conundrum there?
Yeah, and that's a difficult question. That's something that we discussed with Gates quite a bit, right? And this is something that Bill Gates also asked in one of his learning sessions. He's very interested in this topic, and it's a question of to Sharif's point, like why, what do you need to have? And I think model is just one piece, Venki. This is what you're sort of touching on a little bit. Is model is just one component, right? Like how is it delivered? What is the middleware? How do you meet the user where they are? You have to think about all the data infrastructure that is there. Like, does somebody have a smartphone? Does somebody have a feature phone? All of these things come into play. But if you just think about the model, one school of thought is that these Gemini, Claude, whatever, like these will slowly keep sucking up all the data that's out there, and they'll become better and better, and you don't need to have a specialized model. That's one school of thought. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. You see some evidence in some areas, but not a whole lot. But things are moving quickly. So, but even if you say, let's say that's going to happen, I think you can safely say that's not going to happen for a few more years, right? So then what do you do in the interim, right? And as Sharif is pointing out, a lot of the issues are very context dependent, right? And I think this is something that, Venki, you guys talked about in the last podcast, where Prateek was giving an example of kapas ma khali chai or something like that, right? And especially in Africa or Asia, where there's so many dialects, there's so many different ways to say things. How do you collect that corpus of information and pump that into a model? There, the model is almost a commodity at that point of time, right? It is all this additional data that is going to come in. And so the question is, you put some probability on a chat GPT or a Gemini doing this in, let's say, 5 years from now, and whether it's 5%, 10%, don't know. But the question is, what do you do in the interim? Like, you have this tool, people who have smartphones, their WhatsApp, they have feature phones. For all of these things, you can deploy these solutions now, today. It doesn't make sense to wait for 5 years to get this value to these customers who really need them, right? So our approach is keep an eye on where things are going with these bigger models, but let's not stop the work that is needed to get this value of these tools to the farmers and the agronomists and the ecosystem that needs it today. And yeah, that's an interesting question. There's no good answer. Like, you just think about improbabilities and sort of keep marching forward, and say what is needed. And is that flip going to happen? Don't know if it happens. At least that has happened. That's why the benchmarking discussion is important. I don't know if you want to go there or not, but like the benchmarking can help you.
Yeah. No, we'll come to that.
If the flip happens, it has happened because you've created these benchmarks, right?
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand in terms of evolution wise, we will need certain benchmarks to really see to what extent, I mean, that's where for me, the question of, for, the law of requisite variety comes in, right? Like, what is the level of complexity in which you are able to, build in the agriculture system that kind of allows it. Maybe I'll use Preethi's example to go and double click on this, right? Like, let's say there is a woman farmer in Jharkhand. If she opens, let's say, I don't know to what extent you've built your AI model there, but I'm just taking an assumption that is built and live out there, right? Like, how are you sort of going about building it? Like, let's say if I'm a woman farmer from Jharkhand, I'm accessing your AI engine that has been helping Kaitota farmers in Banarghatta region, right? In what ways will I be able to access it? And what is like the underlying engine and interface, and how are you sort of conceptualizing? If we go into little weeds of it, it'll be helpful.
Okay. No, so I think, see, this is a classic example that I'm trying to solve, right? Now, if I have my women farmers in Kaitota growing, say, a specific vegetable, like, say, I don't know, tomatoes, right? Over here. I mean, they grow tomatoes with other vegetables. So their context here is, if there is a problem with their tomatoes, and they talk to my system and say, I'm seeing my leaves turn yellow, right? Why their tomato plants' leaves turn yellow in Kaitota could be due to a lot of reasons. We're doing multi-cropping. The soil is different. The whole climate is different, right? Now, if there was a solution given to leaves turning yellow in Kaitota, and that gets into the model that because your leaves are turning yellow, you need to add a bit of dashakarni or whatever into the system. The same solution, when I present it to the woman in Jharkhand, who is also probably in a forest fringe or whatever, it may not work for her. So the idea is that it's not the single solution, but what we want her to understand is so the agent will be able to discuss with her and say some farmers did this. Now next to the tomatoes, there were chili growing or whatever. And hence this was probably these were the reasons why the tomatoes turned yellow. Now, is there anything similar happening there for your tomatoes to turn yellow? So we'll try to come up with that dialogue and understand the context before giving a solution. Otherwise, if you see a lot of these, like the Dehat chatbot and all, I say my leaves are turning yellow, and immediately there are 3 products that come to me saying, take this, spray it, it's done. But trying to understand a little more and then see, and then there is also an expert loop where we are bringing in the human context as well. If in understanding why that problem is occurring and what could be the solution. So it's not like a system where I ask a problem and a product is pushed to me. That is what we are trying to break here. And then there is a context for that particular woman farmer in Jharkhand. Then maybe there's someone in a similar climatic zone somewhere else, right? So not just understanding the problem at one layer, but understanding the entire ecosystem where that problem is occurring to actually figure out a better solution and to keep track. That's the aim of the system. So that's what we're trying to do. Yeah, I don't know if that helps the question. So there will be, obviously, so we are working on the transformer layer as well, where we are collecting data and the different contexts. So the data is continuous. All the things that the women are talking about is coming into the system and forming this little small language model of these agricultural systems internally. And this is what will then start communicating with other contexts. And then this becomes a little more, I wouldn't say accurate, but a little more, the context just broadens, right? So as the context broadens, solutions become a lot more visible to them.
No, what I was exploring was also, I understand this there, but I'm just thinking in terms of, let's say, right, like if a woman farmer in Bannerghatta is growing a combination of, maybe some bit of ones that require some bit of structures, right, like those protected cultivation kind of structures, not necessarily the complex ones, but slightly simpler ones, and then identifying what combinations would work for them. Let's say, you grow a little bit of bottle gourd or you grow a little bit of turai along with, let's say, tomatoes, and that combination will give you a little more explore. So maybe identifying those models and seeing why didn't you grow this also, right? Like, so those become the maximizer solutions.
Yeah, exactly. So, like, for example, that's what, so if the woman in Jharkhand is saying, I've been growing tomato and their leaves are always turning yellow. Now, understanding that she's been growing only tomatoes for months together, which means the soil doesn't have the kind of nutrients that are needed. So the solutions that will work for her, which need not be just a spray. It could be that, hey, why don't you start growing a companion plant of mint next to it? Or, put a bottle gourd or whatever, whatever is the logic that works. Bringing that could only be the solution. You really don't need to buy a product, right? Or maybe you need to make a concoction of some sort of a specific fertilizer that you can make by yourself with what is available in your region and put it on the plant. So you don't really need to look for solutions that are standardized. So that is exactly the aim. So the solution could be plant something next to you, or it could be do this, with the herbs that are available in your forest, like, ferment them and spray them. Or it could be that, okay, your yield is coming down and figuring out how much of a loss you can take and then figuring out some sort of an intermediary solution while helping her plan the next cycle. So it could go into different levels. But what our system is aiming to do is to start that conversation where this woman can actually talk in her native language. It need not be real time, right? Because agriculture is never real time precision. So she can ask a question and then the system can actually alert experts and say, this is what it is. And when they give an answer, it gets into the, sorry, there's an aircraft. So that was the idea.
So maybe I'll go till, now that I'm this question of context like coming in, right? Like Sharif, you have built a WhatsApp bot, specifically you focused on WhatsApp bots. In that, how do you add that context layer, right? I'm interested to go into the weeds of what you've actually been building in there, right? So in your context, you talk about that India's cloud cover has there's a lot of cloud cover that happens. And so oftentimes precision diagnosis is very much clouded there. So you have come up with some solutions to address that. So how do you provide your context layer, especially when you're dealing with a WhatsApp bot? Because sometimes WhatsApp bot has a very peculiar problem of overload, right? And people want to just quickly move out of it once their context is served. So you can't give, like we had when I was designing a WhatsApp bot for the unified Kishi interface, we faced the same challenge. I couldn't add too many context layers into it because I'm not going to expect the farmer to spend more time giving me more context related ones than WhatsApp. WhatsApp is oftentimes where I go it and quickly come out of it. So how do you then therefore resolve that paradox or that challenge in a WhatsApp context?
Okay. Before answering your question, I would like to touch upon two things said by both Rishi and Preethy. Rishi was wondering whether in a few years from now, these common models like Gemini or ChatGPT will be mature enough to handle all agricultural related questions. I strongly believe that will not happen, because the way these models are built and their architecture and methodology are in general nature, not specific for agriculture. I have tried to distill one of the model and extract the agriculture portion and see how relevant it is. It is not relevant at all, because the contextual interaction as well as the neural networks doesn't work that way. We need to start it from scratch. One. Second thing, as far as what Preethy said, you see, take for example a grape. Now, if there are yellow patches in the grape, general tendency is that it is a disease for which you have to apply this kind of thing. That is what the model will tell. Rarely, I haven't yet seen any model telling that it could be a zinc deficiency. That kind of intelligence is not yet available in any of the models. That is what I'm trying to bring in my WhatsApp platform. How do I do that? I have gone past the single agent system to swarm of agents. The latest trend is swarm agents only. You don't depend on one agent. There should be an agent which should veto this thing if there is a hallucination. So that is where it is like human in the loop. Someone sitting, agronomist telling that no, this is not correct. Now, we cannot be finding agronomist every time to interact and give solution. That is why I have designed agronomist as an agent. And there are 36 agents working in my WhatsApp platform to achieve this. I'm not saying I have reached there, but I have made a beginning where the solutions offered by my WhatsApp platform is nearest to the point, we can say. One, and regarding that contextual thing you were telling, I have made it a point that we don't ask what you call long questions to the farmers at all. Okay, the farmer says, my tomato has what you call dark spot, for example. That's all they will say. टमाटर में कुछ काला दिख रहा है, बस इतना ही वो बोलेगा. You won't tell anything more than that. So then it has to give in one or two lines just what could be the possibilities, and then ask a gentle question next. Can you tell me from which area, how many acres of tomato, and what is the age of tomato, so that I can give you a better advice. Now, some farmers do reply to that, some farmers don't. They stop at that. Now, how do we break that barrier is this next thing I'm working on. So all the advisories, I have seen to it that all the advisories delivered are not more than 3 to 4 lines. Not more than that. They don't have patience to read a long story or paragraph. No, doesn't work with them. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah. No, I get it. Yeah, but that's where maybe I'll take this back to Rishi here. Right? See, but in a context with, especially like for instance the Gates kind of foundation, right, where there is a funding needs a certain level of impact reporting, right? In terms of seeing what is the level at which it has delivered results there, right? So how do you approach benchmarking in this context, right? Like, do you sort of measure it based on, like, see, the easiest way is to say, did they buy the products that I recommended? But that will work in a private context, but it will not work in a public context. In a public context, one has to look at the effectiveness of the advice there and whether it really solved the problem. So how do you approach, in the context that you're working on in an Indian African context, how do you approach benchmarking of the systems that you're building?
Maybe Preeti, you want to go first? You have something to say.
No, I just wanted to say two things. One was that the fact, not, I'll come back to what Venki you just asked Rishi, but what Sharif sir said was that
Call me
farmers
just
don't
Sheriff.
have
Call me
no
just Sheriff. Yeah.
okay thank you. But the women are
Allow
very
me to be
descriptive.
as young as you. Yeah.
The women are very descriptive. So I don't know if there has been a study of
Very
the
interesting.
users that
Very interesting.
the users that we are actually dealing with, the farmer that we think of, right? Women are very descriptive. They will go into details. They're like, see, my plant has this, my tomato has this black spot. They don't just say that. They're like, I've been doing this. I've been putting this spray. I've been, tilling. I've been removing the weeds. I've been doing everything. But why is this
Oh.
coming? Right? They get into the details. There has never been a situation in, all the time that I've worked with these women where they're like, when there has been a drastic issue, right? Even then, for example, with our farms keep getting attacked by elephants, right? They're not like, my farm has attacked by elephant, tell me what to do. No, they're like, my farm's attacked with elephants, the solar fence didn't work, blah blah blah. And they're like, okay, so what I've done is I'm planting chilies on the borders. I'm planting bitter gourd on the border. They keep trying, and then they say, I've tried this, tell me if there's something better. So they always also they're very descriptive. They say, these are the different solutions I've tried, do you have a recommendation? That is something that I have seen consistently with all the women, irrespective of their level of expertise in farming. So that was one point I wanted to call out. Coming back to your question about the products, right? The men will buy any product that is sold to you, irrespective of whether it is useful or not. If someone says this is good and this will give you X yield, so the men are always looking at that final number, right? So from what I understand, just because a product is being bought multiple times doesn't equate to the product being impactful on the field, right? They will continue to buy. And I've actually seen farms where, you go into the shed and there are like these cartons of products that they've bought. They're like, no. And then there's another thing. They're like, no, there was a subsidy, so I bought. Right? Now, whether it is useful to me or not, it's not there. But then if you look at the high level data, which, like the foundation would look at, it's like, hey, so much of the product has been sold, so it's probably working.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
so that
yeah.
there is that gap.
All positive,
yeah. There's that gap that still exists, is what I feel. So that was my
No, but I'm
sense.
very interested now that you said it's turning out to be a very interesting behavioral dimension here, right? Like, for instance, would if there were, like, I'm just trying to place two parallel scenarios there based on the data that you've seen. Like, if there were multiple slew of products that are being recommended, how does we saw what men typically respond to. If women were to sort of take put in that same context there, would they be immediately hesitant to sort of buy products, or is there a inkling to experiment and test it out? How do you see that aspect there?
Very much they want to experiment and test it out. 100%. They will not just buy it blindly because someone said it. They will never do that. Because they will firstly, they will not accept it on the face value at all. They need a solid reason. They need proof to actually even try it. So one of these local companies that we work with came up with a weeder. So also, I think there's this whole discussion about farm equipment not being woman friendly at all, right? They are heavy, they are not comfortable to use, and these women wear saris and nighties and they keep getting stuck, etc. So one company came with a weeder and they said, we've designed it to be lightweight and we want the women to try it. So, when they came with a purchase option. The women said, we're not buying it, we will try it. And then the feedback they gave that company was so perfect. They said, see, it is lightweight, yes, but then the battery is in the back, right? So if you try to move it, the battery gets it's not weeding properly. The weeds are flying everywhere, and then the battery becoming heavy is actually affecting us to walk forward, right? They said, no, we don't need it. We would rather sit, squat and continue weeding. So they are not at all. But then, I mean, yeah, they wouldn't have bought it. Whereas the landowners, like, hey, why are you not buying it? And then they gave it back and said, this is our feedback. We're giving it back. It is of no use to us. When I first started interacting with them, and they said our biggest problem is weeds because there are so many weeds, and there's this one particular type of weed which looks like a grass called the conere. For them to take it out of the ground, it goes deep. For them to take it out of the ground is a lot of manual labor. So, me being me, I was like, okay, first we thought we look at drones, and we were looking at various options where, you have these drones that have precision LEDs that sort of, burn the weeds, right? So we said we'll do that, but in a multi-cropping environment, it didn't really work. Then we said we'll design a rover and all that stuff. They're like, no, we don't need it, so there is that. I mean, obviously there is a huge barrier to them to adopt any new technology, but also the reasoning is very solid. It's not like they're like, I'm scared. They give very specific reasons as to why. And then they also said that this grass, if we pull it out, separate it and compost it, it is very good nutrient for these types of plants. Right? So that whole understanding of, like, what we discussed in our retreat with Mithali and all, and how plants are able to understand what they need, the root systems need specific things. They already have that inherent knowledge, but probably they don't know how to put it out there. They're like, no, this one goes deep, so the root gets all these things. So if I compost it and put it back, it is going to help. So I don't want to destroy it. Right?
Yeah,
So,
no,
yeah.
This also brings me another interesting behavioral dimension that I've observed in terms of men buying weeders and women buying weeders. Like one of the things, there was this company in Coimbatore that was selling a weeder product, and they have built a weeder where it's pretty much like a joystick where I'm sitting in a far distance, and I'm controlling the weeder by a joystick that's moving in. So now I can now almost say to a maybe somewhat bet that it is largely for men as users, because it helps the men where, like, you're sitting in one and it just does circular movements or just more straight movements there, but you're holding a joystick and doing it. So, but if I were to design that for women, I think I'd design it very differently.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you. Fascinating. But now to go back to Rishi's question there, like, given that we are dealing with public set of problems and dealing with benchmarking, right? In the previous podcast with Sachi and Prateek, we talked about the Agri Standards Foundation that Prateek and Sachi have set it up, right, for benchmarking with agricultural data effectiveness and the advice effectiveness in the AI context there. Right. So in a public data context, the complexity is a little more higher, right? Because especially when you're dealing with somebody like Gates Foundation, because Gates Foundation is also funding it and is also providing the research that tells whether this is worth the funding or not, right? So in that case, how do you sort of deal with the benchmarking aspect there?
Yeah, I think before we go there, like, where do you make investment? Like, that's the first question you have, right? And so if you sort of look at the stack of capabilities that is needed to deliver a service, let's say, advisory service, right? You need sort of compute, you have all the NVIDIAs and the Googles of the world, right? Like, they don't need any funding. They have all the money in the world. So you don't need to fund them. So if you go about that, like, oh, we need these LLM models. Like, again, I slightly disagree with Sharif that India should build I think they should do it for different reasons than what you're saying. And we can talk about that. But, these companies are pouring billions of dollars in it, right? And so there's no need to put money there. Now, how do you deliver this, right? And there are different delivery mechanisms. Sharif talked about WhatsApp, but that needs a smartphone where I can install the WhatsApp app, right? Like, a lot of people don't have that. Then voice can become a very powerful tool where I can call a number. And, there, I think being able to understand the local language and the dialect and be able to sort of the AI agent responding quickly and responding in a language and a way that the person understands, right? So there are different ways in which you can deliver that. So maybe that's an area potentially to fund. Like, how do we build this corpus of information and data, like the kapas mein jali hai, whatever, right? Like, how do you build that? And maybe that needs funding because nobody's willing to fund that. And then how do you provide that end user experience, right? And who is it for? And there maybe VC or other governments can fund, but that's another area that an impact organization can fund, right? So you have to sort of look at where is the funding gap, which an impact-based organization can provide, so that you actually deliver some impact at the end, right? So that's sort of the first level of thought process. Then how do you sort of measure your impact? And that's very difficult to measure. And at a high level, what you're looking for is, does this improve, let's say, profitability for that farmer, right? For that piece of land. And advisory is an input into it. That's not the output, right? Like if you get better advisory, you have a better shot at improving your profitability. And profitability can be improved because of better advisory, better inputs in terms of seed, irrigation, better market linkages. So it's a very complicated issue, but you can run some sort of RCT trials and collect some data to say, is this really having an impact? And that you get that much further down the line, right? Maybe like 2-3 years down the line, you get some information. So a lot of it is you're going by that impact is almost like a lagging indicator, but that's an important one. And that's where you have to come up with, are people using it? Are more women using it, right? And you highlighted a bunch of interesting points. And when it comes to sort of women or sort of marginalized, I don't want to call all women marginalized, but like there are marginalized sections of farmers. So then you think about, can I reach them and do they have access to this information? All right. And you can track that metric. Am I able to provide them some recognition and can they trust me, right? So you can collect some data on that. Right? This is not the final metric that you're looking for, but these are the indicators which say, okay, if I have all these, I have a better shot of having an impact. With the tool or the advisory I'm providing, is it feasible to act on, right? Like if, to Sharif's point, like you say, oh, for your problem, go buy a 2 crore rupee tractor. If that's your recommendation, like that's not feasible, right? Like, so is what I'm telling you, is it feasible for you to act on, right? So that's another thing that you can track. And is the person capable to act on that? It's feasible, but this particular individual is not capable to act on, right? So you track that as well. And then you look at sort of usage and adoption, right? So you try to break down that problem, and benchmarking addresses just one piece of it. Like, this is like, if I give this advice, will they trust me or not? Is this valuable or not? And then you can look at sort of feasibility and capability to act. Those are very much context dependent. But you have to look at all of these factors and try to improve on those to have a better chance of ultimately saying this improved yield or this improved profitability, or because of this person was able to send their son or daughter to a better school or better college, right? Like, they show up in other places as well, right? So it's a complicated issue. So that's why you have to break it down and look at these sort of sub factors with the trust that say, hey, based on we've seen in the past, if these things work, then this is moving in the right direction, right?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, today the question of impact is, I mean, I do get invited to do a lot of impact report analysis, and I oftentimes, one of the problems I face is the definition of impact is so fluid. Right? Today we have reached a stage in this ecosystem where anything can be dressed up as impact. And so it becomes a question like, there's no technology, so build technology that becomes impact. If that technology is solving the problem, that's another impact. But did it create another problem? We don't. That's outside the scope oftentimes, right? So maybe I'll bring this as an open question to Preethy, right? Since you are working in a non-profit context with Kaitota and building this model, right? Let's say tomorrow from the Gates Foundation or anyone else was to come and say, I have a 10 crore budget or 5 crore budget. But tell me what exactly is the hardest part that where you need funding in terms of taking. I'm very impressed with what you are building for women farmers, and I want to take this to across India. Then what will be what would be your pitch like? Like what would be the area where you would require investment or funding from?
Interesting question. I think primarily would be, I mean, I don't know if I can say that's the major chunk, but I would say maybe say 30% would be outreach, because getting to these women, right? Getting to them and building their trust. With Kaitota, it's taken us with Vishala, it's taken her so many years, which is why I was able to get in, and the trust establishment was much easier for me. Vishala is my co-founder at the Buffalo Back, and she's been working with the villagers for a long time. But I think a large portion of it would probably, I would want to focus on reaching these women and telling them how such a model can actually be sustainable and can sort of give them that kind of independence. Reaching out is where I would probably look for, because obviously I can't do standard digital, pushing ads and stuff, that's where technology will not work for me. I need to reach these women. Second would obviously tech, because the more money we have, the better, we can build. We can only do with some with the kind of budgets that we have. But if I want to sort of go all out, bring in different types of dialects, bring in different types of experts into the system to train our data, right? So that would be another aspect. So I think these would be the two big ticket items that I would really appreciate funding for. Then the rest of it, I think those would be the primary things. And getting more collaborators.
But to build on what Preethy said, like the different dialects, right? I don't think individual companies should try to solve that problem, right? Because you'll solve it somebody that's
it's a common problem.
No, it should, which is why it should be. I mean, at the end goal is this entire platform that we're building. We want to make it a DPI. So it should not be that, hey, it is. I don't want to have 1,000 people saying I have a Kaitota product. I want to see 1,000 Kaitotas, whatever they want to call it as, right? So that would be the idea. So absolutely not. I don't want to build my own
problem
set.
where somebody like Gates Foundation should ideally be investing in also, right? Like since they have
so that's the thought process, right? Like either they'll invest in it or they will, sort of influence the local government. Say, hey, you should invest in this because this is a bigger project. You have the expertise. You have the local boots on the ground staff to do this, and we can help you set up a program, or maybe we can fund you. I don't know if they do that or not. But to your point, it should be part of the DPI public good infrastructure, because if it built once and maintained, like everybody benefits, right? And it's sort of almost pre-competitive, right? It's you're not going to compete based on that.
Exactly. And I don't think this needs this. I don't think this needs the competition at this level. I think the competition comes in terms of products that are focused to the people who are buying and subscribing.
See, so since there is no there, the pre-competitor becomes competitor. Since there's no infra there. So somebody.
So I would rather. That's true. No, I think I'd like to change it from competitive to collaborative. So I have a better dialect. Let me put it into this.
No, see, in the other hat that I wear as a founder of a non-profit called Mandram, we built this project with IIT Madras. Where we were providing the training data for their Indic AI models. So we gave them in Tamil, we gave like every emotion. So the brief for them was that they gave us was for every emotion, and for there you say come up with specific Tamil sentences which will be read out and translated, transcribed, and then pulled out. So we worked on every emotion, positive, negative, tone variation. So we had an entire sort of like a permutation combination of all emotions, positive, negative tones, and all of them. So that work was possible in a very public DPA context because it was Bashini coming up with IIT Madras and building that. But I don't think it has been attempted. If it's been attempted in DPI, maybe somebody who is listening to this, it's a good project to work on as a commons project where you sort of just focus on the agricultural dialects itself, because that itself is a huge complexity there, and it varies every 150 kilometers when you drive down from one place to another.
So very, 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 very small anecdote is have you heard of this wild berry called shundekai? I think it's very popular in the Tamil. So it's called turkey berry in English, which I got to know only after. So The women, there are some women within, and the dialects are so varied that within the space that I work in, some women call in Tamil, we call it as chundekai, we put the ch. There are some people in Kannada that say sir, sundekai, right? So you can still figure out that it is similar. Then there are some women that call it chikka badnekai, which is basically a small brinjal, So if you see a berry is now become a brinjal, which is a completely different economy of agricultural, crops, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
what is it? Is it a wild berry? Is it a brinjal? So how do you bring those dialects,
Mm.
which are like a few kilometers apart, right? So it would be a very interesting project. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, maybe to come to Sharif here, you were talking a lot about sovereign AI and aspects there, and I also kind of agree with you that there are certain structural limitations where some of these systems cannot really adapt to the agricultural context, right? I mean, I've spent enough time in mulling over some of these problems there, and I've also came to the similar conclusion that they're not going to catch up with it anyway because there is a structural deficiency in the way they're seeing some of these things there. But to come back to the question around funding and investments, right? When you see the problem becomes complicated when you're a private entrepreneur trying to solve public problems, right? And when you are saying that sovereign AI that is built for Indian specific context there, right? If you were to really look at what are the 2-3 layers, pre-competitive layers that has to be invested and funded in, that will help your business, what you are building in, what would those be?
Okay. You see, the combinatorial factors of agricultural problems, be it spraying or even pest detection and all, the combinatorial factors so exponential that classical computing or the normal models are failing to do the right job. Now, that is one point. Another side, sometimes I wonder whether we are in a prison of established norms and practices, and we don't want to come out of it, break it open and come out and start thinking in a different way. For example, you see, the entire world's quantum computing ecosystem is based on zero Kelvin, what you call paradigm. Okay. Now, I'm sure you will all agree with me that nature is the biggest quantum computer. Is there any second thoughts on that? I would like to hear before I
You'll have to probably explain a little bit of quantum computing. We've not gone into that side at all. So maybe you'll have to explain a little bit of context of primer
I will
on
come
what
to
is
that.
quantum computing and then maybe connect it to what you are trying to build.
Okay. For example, the chlorophyll synthesis during sunlight is one of the best example of quantum computing happening in the nature. The way the various phonons are transferred, how energetically they are moved around is something fantastic to read. If you read, it will be like a Robert Ludlum novel, I assure you. Okay, so I'm asking this fundamental question. The entire quantum computing ecosystem is based on zero Kelvin, which is spending billions and billions of dollars. Google, Microsoft, so many big people are working on that. And I think that they are going in the wrong direction because nature is already doing this in room temperature or the ambient temperature. How can anything natural exist in zero Kelvin? So we need to capture the quantum particle or the qubit in room temperature to build a quantum processor that works in 300K, not 0K. Now, if I go with this concept, who do you think will fund me? Everyone will say you are crazy. I don't know what Rishi will think. You may be having a sophisticated words entwined in a Gates language, but nothing, no, this thing, disrespect or something to you, Rishi. I'm just trying to put it in a different perspective. So, when I told this, the National Quantum Mission listened. They said, oh yeah, okay, try. I submitted a proposal for 18.36 crores and that has come to the technical review team. I'm surprised, seriously. I think it is high time Gates Foundation start thinking about this. We should apply quantum computing to agriculture to bring a paradigm shift in agriculture, not just to do cosmetic changes in this implement to getting better. This implement has got you have autonomous tractor, you have an autonomous tiller. No, that is not going to bring a paradigm shift. For example, application of fertilizer in 1 acre has got at least 1,000,000 points where variational level of fertilizer has to be applied. Now, do you think classical computing will be able to do this? Definitely not. Okay, you may say quantum computing has not developed to that stage because there is so much noise. Noise is not stabilized. The qubits are not stabilized. Only 133 qubits are working till now. Vagera, vagera. But I'm telling you, when you are going in the wrong direction, you will be facing the same problem. When you have a naturally working quantum computer which works at room temperature, quantum processor, you will have it in a laptop and you will be able to work on a solution. Everyone, depending, someone will work on tomato, someone will work on pest attack, someone will work on the yellow leaves on the grape, and someone will work on the red rot in sugar cane. That will only bring the paradigm shift in agriculture. That's my strongest view.
Interesting. I mean, I wish I knew more about quantum computing to really go deeper into this, but maybe I'll do it a separate session.
No, I don't know much about quantum computing.
No, I would love to dig more deeper in there. I know in Hyderabad there have been an attempt to build a quantum computer, and because I stay very near to TIFR.
75 crores.
They are trying to build something there. So, but maybe we'll dig that separately at some point and unpack its various layers.
The refrigerator for the quantum computing to keep at minus 250 degree alone cost $15 million. Crazy. Imagine what you can fund with that $15 million if it is spent in the agriculture in this direction.
No, but whether quantum computing is needed or not, one thing is for sure is that we will need to push our paradigms and technologies there.
That is the present and future, Venki. Take my word for it. I don't know how long I will be there.
We'll
but I'm sure you guys
time.
will be there, and you will remember my words.
Sure. I'm happy to do a separate session there. We can maybe go a little more deeper into that. But thank you. I think it was fun talking about a lot of the ways in which each of you were sort of circling around there. For me, the most fascinating part of this whole dialogue was actually to look at some of these behavioral nuances that were coming out very interestingly. I think some of those parts were very interesting there, and I think in a small holding context, there is no clear distinction between when is private and what is public. Right? I think there is always a blurry layer that, where agriculture itself is the most public of vocations in many ways, right? You're feeding people and it's largely a thankless job because you only complain when the food doesn't look in a certain way or it causes issues, but we don't thank otherwise when the food is actually doing what it's intended to do. So in that ways, I think many of us are attempting to sort of push the boundary and needle there. And I hope this work continues. Thank you very much for speaking, taking this morning time and evening time for you, Rhishi, speaking with us. Is there any last words you want to close on with?
I mean, we could go on for another hour, but I know we need to stop. I think the behavioral piece is so important, right? Because we seem to ignore that. I mean, other sort of weird example I saw when I used to work at Amazon Kindle, what we saw that the growth rate for erotic novels was very high among women and compared to men. And I was like, okay, why is this? And so when you dig into it, what the reason was that if you have a physical book and if you want to read an erotic novel as a woman, there's something on the cover, you can't read it. You can't read on a train, you can't read it at home. And so women would stay away from those novels, even if they wanted to. And once you put it on Kindle, now nobody knows what you're reading. And that sort of social sort of taboo went away because nobody could see. And that's a behavioral change that was brought about by technology. And everybody thinking, oh, digital is easy, but like it was something completely different which was driving that change, right? Your example of, oh, I'm wearing a sari, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I think, and which also means you really need to understand the context. And it all comes down to, do you understand the context? Do you understand the user? Do you understand what problems are there? It's not just about ROI, it's about all these other things, which can often lead to adoption or not adoption of a particular solution. So I think maybe that's sort of, if I had to summarize this discussion, understand the context, understand the problem, understand the user. It's not just about financial ROI. There are all these other factors which you have to take into consideration.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Anything from you, Preeti?
Yeah, no, I think I mean, whatever Rishi said is what I was thinking as well. But I also like the fact that, I think we have to look at agriculture itself as public infrastructure, because
Yeah.
it gives all of us food, right? So how do we, looking at who is the one who's actually doing the agriculture, designing our systems around them, that would be the key. And of course, the other point is, at the end of the day, food, at least currently, is growing in soil. So ensuring that the soil is protected while we build all our systems and all the solutions, and ensure that there is regeneration happening there. That would sort of be like this ideal situation that we all live in, or as what the Gen Zs call their Roman Empire. Yeah.
Interesting. Sharif, any closing
I
thoughts?
can't agree more with Preeti about agriculture as an infrastructure. That's the statement. I really loved it. And the perspective she brought about how women think in doing farming is, I learned few things from that. And I also learned few things from Rishi's perspective of how organizations like Bill Gates look at the disseminating what you call help or support to agriculture and other infrastructure. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to meet these wonderful people, and you also. I think we are meeting on virtual call first time. Thank you for that.
Yeah. No, pleasure is mine. I hope you will continue to do the work, and we'll stay connected. And good luck with all of your endeavors, and hope to catch up again in another podcast some other time. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.